Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will offer an update on the case of Karen Reed. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Karen Reed was born in 1980 and lived in Mansfield, Massachusetts. This is 31 miles south of Boston. She worked as a financial analyst and as an adjunct professor. In 2020, Karen became romantically involved with a police officer named John O'Keefe. They reconnected after originally meeting in 2004. Karen spent most nights at John's house in Canton, Massachusetts. The relationship between Karen and John was volatile and tumultuous. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On January 29, 2022, at 6:04 a.m., the police received a 911 call reporting that John O'Keefe had been found in the snow. He was near a house at 34 Fairview Road in Canton, which was owned by a retired police officer named Brian Albert. At this time, there was heavy snow and the temperature was in the teens. When emergency responders arrived, they found John O'Keefe dead in the snow. His cause of death was blunt force trauma to his head, with hypothermia as a contributing factor. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. On January 28, 2022, the day before John O'Keefe died, he and Karen Reed visited two bars in Canton. When they were at the second bar, called the Waterfall Bar and Grill, they met with several friends, including Brian Albert. Again, Brian owned the Fairview Road house where John's body was later found. He invited John, Karen, and a few other people back to his house for some type of party. At 12:11 a.m., Karen and John left the bar and drove to Brian's house in Karen's black 2021 Lexus LX 570 SUV. Karen would later claim she consumed 4 drinks. The police said it was more like 9. Karen and John arrived at 34 Fairview Road at 12:24 a.m. According to Karen, John exited her SUV to make sure this was a place she wanted to visit. Data from John's phone indicated the phone moved at 12:31 a.m., signifying his exit from the vehicle. From her SUV, Karen said that she observed John opening the front door of the house, but never actually saw him enter the house. Karen expected John to return in a few minutes, but he never did. She left and drove back to his house at 1 Meadows Avenue in Canton, arriving at 12:36 a.m. During the early morning hours, a snowstorm hit the area. Karen called John a few times and left voicemails consistent with her being upset with him. At 4:38 a.m., she woke up and continued attempting to contact John by phone, but there was no response. Supposedly concerned about John's well-being, Karen contacted 2 women, Jennifer McCabe and Carrie Roberts, to enlist their help in locating John. At 5:07 a.m., Karen was captured backing her SUV into John's Chevrolet Traverse. The rear passenger side of her vehicle made contact with the Chevrolet and moved it a little bit. Karen met up with Jennifer and Carrie. All 3 women drove to the house on Fairview Road, where Karen noticed John in the snow. Investigators found red and clear plastic consistent with a vehicle taillight around John's body. When they examined Karen's Lexus SUV, they noticed the passenger side taillight was broken. The police believe that Karen backed her SUV into John, striking him in the arm. As a result of this impact, he was sent to the ground and hit his head. This is what caused his death. On February 1, 2022, Karen Reed was arrested in connection with John O'Keefe's death. On June 10 of that year, she was indicted on charges of second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of bodily injury. At first, the case against Karen did not seem particularly mysterious, but it attracted a tremendous amount of interest from the public. Some people believe that John was not killed in the snow by Karen, but rather he was killed by one or more people inside the Fairview Road house. A massive conspiracy developed, and Karen was framed for John's murder. To support this theory, they pointed to unusual marks on John's arm, which they believe were caused by Brian Albert's German Shepherd. Karen went to trial in April 2024. On July 1 of that year, a mistrial was declared. The jury found themselves unable to reach a unanimous verdict. Karen went on trial for the second time in April 2025. On June 18, 2025, Karen Reed was found not guilty of second-degree murder, not guilty of manslaughter, and not guilty of leaving the scene of bodily injury. The jury found her guilty of operating a vehicle under the influence. Karen Reed was sentenced to 1 year of probation. Now moving to my analysis. Karen Reed maintains her innocence, and she was found not guilty of the most serious charges. She has a massive number of supporters who wholeheartedly believe that John O'Keefe was murdered by someone else, and Karen was framed in a massive law enforcement conspiracy. The Commonwealth, of course, disagrees. They argue the evidence clearly points to Karen's guilt. This brings me to the question. Karen Reed was found not guilty in court, but was she guilty in reality? Let's take a look at the evidence both for and against the idea that she was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. On the night that John was killed, Karen had consumed 9 drinks, and her BAC was over the limit for operating a motor vehicle. Karen was the last known person to see John O'Keefe alive, and the first one to notice he was missing. She claimed that she dropped John off at the Fairview Road house and saw him walk to the door, but 11 witnesses at the party said John never entered the house. Data from John's cell phone indicated the phone stopped moving at 12:32 a.m. Again, he exited Karen's vehicle at 12:31 a.m. The phone never moved again after this. If John made it into the house and someone killed him there, as Karen's supporters believe, how did the killers move his phone back outside without it capturing the data? Furthermore, the temperature of John's phone decreased steadily after it stopped moving. Within an hour, it went from 72 degrees to 50 degrees. This is consistent with the phone being outside in the cold weather. The passenger side taillight of Karen's SUV was broken, and the pieces were found near John's body. Data from Karen's Lexus indicated that it drove 87 feet in reverse, reaching 24 miles per hour. Drivers typically do not exceed 5 miles an hour in reverse. When Karen left John's house at 5:07 a.m., she backed into his Chevrolet SUV with her Lexus SUV. The contact between the vehicles was made on or near the passenger side taillight, which makes it seem like this is what may have caused the damage to the taillight of the Lexus. The problem is the police did not find any taillight fragments at John's house. Lexus SUVs have a warning system designed to prevent drivers from backing into objects. How did Karen back into John's vehicle in the first place? Did she ignore all the warnings? Maybe the collision took place because she needed to explain how the taillight had become broken. There is evidence suggesting that the relationship between Karen and John wasn't going too well. For example, John referred to his relationship with Karen as toxic. Karen accused John of cheating on a recent trip to Aruba, and Karen left impolite voicemails on John's cell phone on the night of the incident. For example, Karen screamed, "You are a blanking loser, blank yourself," and "John, I blanking hate you." 27 minutes after she left John, Karen left a message on his phone saying, "Nobody knows where you are." This seems strange considering she knew exactly where he was at this time. When Karen called Jennifer McCabe during the early morning hours of January 29, she claimed that she left John at the Waterfall Bar and Grill. Jennifer reminded Karen that she was with John in front of the Fairview Road house. When Karen called Carrie Roberts, she told her she thought John may have been hit by a snowplow. This seems like a very strange assumption under the circumstances. Karen jumped right over the obvious, like a fall or alcohol poisoning, and landed straight on the improbably specific snowplow theory. In terms of likelihood, the snowplow theory ranks somewhere between he fell from a hot air balloon and he was eaten by a pack of Tasmanian devils. Out of all the things that could have happened to John, why hit by a snowplow? Perhaps Karen needed to account for both John's injuries and his location in the snow. When Karen, Jennifer, and Carrie pulled up to the Fairview Road house, Karen noticed John's body in the snow 12 feet from the roadway. The other 2 women did not see him there. It was almost like Karen knew where his body was the entire time. At the Fairview Road house, 4 paramedics heard Karen repeatedly say, "I hit him." Karen asked Jennifer, "Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?" and mentioned how one of her taillights had been damaged. The defense suggested that the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, could have planted the taillight fragments at the Fairview Road house, but police reports indicated he was never alone with Karen's SUV and he never returned to the house. The defense said that Jennifer McCabe searched the internet at 2:27 a.m. for the term "how long to die in cold." This was before she was contacted by Karen. However, an expert for the Commonwealth said a browser was opened at 2:27 a.m. The search actually occurred at 6:20 a.m. Jennifer said Karen asked her to make this search. Now moving to the exculpatory factors. There were no witnesses to John O'Keefe's death, no video. He could have been hit by another vehicle, like one not driven by Karen, or he could have been beaten to death. John had multiple lacerations on his arm, which, in theory, could have been caused by a dog. Engineering experts said that the damage to Karen's SUV was inconsistent with striking a pedestrian, and John's injuries were inconsistent with being struck by a vehicle. The lead investigator, Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor, made offensive statements in text messages. For example, he called Karen a whack job blank. The blank rhymes with punt. He expressed disappointment that he had not seen a clothing-challenged image of Karen during his investigation and mentioned that she had no blank. This blank rhymes with pass. Michael was fired before the second trial. It's possible that Karen Reed struck and killed John O'Keefe, but did not intend to kill him. Maybe this was an accident. Backing over somebody with a vehicle is a bizarre and unreliable murder method. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I think that Karen Reed was guilty? In my opinion, she was guilty of second-degree murder in reality, but I am not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that she was guilty of any crime other than operating a vehicle under the influence. The jury made the right decision in this case, but maybe for the wrong reason. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. One juror who was interviewed by the media said the jury struggled with all the holes in the Commonwealth's case and felt as though the police had conducted a poor investigation. She did not believe that the Lexus SUV killed John. Rather, he died inside the house. This is consistent with the jury believing in the conspiracy theory promoted by some of Karen's diehard supporters. The jury found her not guilty because they believed she was actually innocent. They thought someone else murdered John O'Keefe. In my opinion, the appropriate reason to find Karen not guilty is solely because there was reasonable doubt. I believe she really did it, but the Commonwealth failed to prove their case. There are 2 key lessons that can be learned from the case of Karen Reed. Lesson number 1, the police need to be unbiased at all times, including when they are conducting investigations. This verdict exposed the deep fatigue the public has with the so-called thin blue line. They are concerned that law enforcement officers will stick up for each other before they will defend the innocent. The public demands that police are competent and honest. In my opinion, Michael Proctor's inappropriate behavior is what led to the not guilty verdict, but all the officers involved were dragged through the mud as well. Lesson number 2, conspiracy theories flourish in environments where people are frustrated, frightened, and have distrust. In the case of Karen Reed, the verdict was not only based on reasonable doubt, it was based on a substantial investment in the idea that dozens of police officers conspired against her. In theory, they were trying to protect fellow officers. This conspiracy would have been so vast and unwieldy, it would have almost certainly failed. Even so, this is what many people believe. This serves as a reminder that when institutions fail to inspire confidence, alternate narratives can take root, sometimes obscuring the line between fact and fiction. There are consequences for this trend, including people escaping responsibility for criminal behavior. The public would rather have somebody like Karen Reed walk free than allow corrupt officers to go unnoticed or unpunished. This verdict represents the intersection between paranoia and accountability. a strange place, which recently has been seeing a dramatic uptick in traffic. Those are my thoughts on the case of Karen Read. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon.